Well, we're at the top of the hour and this is a live event, so I think we should get started. Welcome everybody to today's Brink event, a platform for sharing current conversations on critical business issues. Today, we'll be discussing what's on executives' mind as we enter 2022 and the implications for the people agenda. We'll discuss the global risk landscape and how future work plans are shifting and changing as a result of the events of the last 2 years. Unfortunately, David Henderson was unable to join us today. I just noticed that my slides are not moving. We do it manually. Unfortunately, David Henderson was unable to join us today, but I'm thrilled to welcome Sally Henderson. I understand no relative, but a close work partner. Sally is the group head of talent at Zurich Insurance Group, and she is joined by Carmen Fernandez, Chief People Officer at Marsh McLennan. Sally and Carmen, welcome. It's wonderful to be kicking off the year with two vibrant ladies in really impactful roles.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Great. Looking forward to our chat today. Of course, it has been an interesting couple of years. I do believe that we've had a lot of shifts in how we've been thinking about the people agenda and some of the challenges that we need to consider in terms of the heightened risk landscape we find ourselves in. And we've all got many stories lodged in our minds about what life has been like. And of course, it's clear that there are many different realities for that. The pandemic has simultaneously accelerated many of the trends associated with the future of work, but it's also exacerbated and exposed some of the inequities we already knew existed in society. These events have forced us all to pause. We started to see the world in a new way. And although at times we were locked in our houses, the world actually looked bigger. We started to see beyond our jobs, think about what our lives could look like if we did work differently, and started to reflect on some broader issues around society and sustainability. And of course, when people's values, beliefs, and behaviors shift, organizations need to change. This year, it's no surprise that 97% of executives are planning significant transformation. That's an early finding from our Mercer's Global Talent Trends result that just came out. So what does this mean for the people agenda? Well, prior to the pandemic, a lot of the discussions around the future of work were dominated by the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. We were looking at what jobs will be impacted by these new technologies. What is that skilling and reskilling imperative we need to drive through our organizations? That's still there, but there's been a real shift towards appreciating the different stakeholders that we serve as an organization, a shift in the purpose and a recognition of what success might need to look like in a new world era. And we're building back with greater focus on health and well-being and a desire to cultivate more human-centered leadership practices. It's exciting times. This work that I've just been sharing here is the precursor to a new report coming out by the World Economic Forum next month, which will specifically look at new work standards that have come into being during this period. This new future of work framework talks about what do we now mean by decent work? How do we appeal to the next generation? And how do we make sure that we're taking full responsibilities, not just for the people within our organization, but for the communities that we serve? This is critical as executives focus on how do we stay relevant, not just to our customers and investors' changing views, but also to our employees. And we very much enter this year with concerns about what is on that agenda? What do we need to do to stay relevant to these different voices? Well, the Global Risk Report is normally a wonderful asset to help us navigate that landscape. It just came out last week, and I do urge you to take a read of it. The report paints a picture of the world that's not only evolving in different ways in different places, but where there are significant fractures emerging, with 42% of executives predicting constant volatility and multiple surprises in the year ahead. A couple of notes from me that I pulled out of the survey. One, the scars of COVID-19 are only just being felt. Social cohesion, erosion, livelihood crisis, mental health deterioration. These were 3 of the 5 risks that have deteriorated the most during this period. Looming debts were identified as an imminent threat, especially as government stimulus, vital to protect income over the last 2 years, is now receding, and the full impact on employees' livelihoods are being felt. Extreme weather, and more specifically, climate action failure, was called out very vocally in the report. And they discussed some of the downstream consequences, not just to our organizations, but to organizations in our supply chain. I found it really interesting, the discussion around connectivity blind spots. They mentioned the digital inequality that we need to address with 3 billion people offline, but also the rising challenges around cybersecurity failures as we all migrated to doing a lot more online, digitally, and from our homes. And finally, the report calls out some growing rivalries between national and global interests that executives expect will be very relevant to their strategic agenda this year. All of these, of course, have significant implications for the wealth, the health, and the careers of the people in our talent ecosystems and the communities that we serve. Sally, I'd love to come to you first. Risk is very much home ground for Zurich. And I'm curious, as an organization that is a multi-line insurer in over 200 territories with 55,000 employees, how are you thinking about these risks? And how are they influencing some of the C-suite conversations you're part of?
Thanks, Kate. It's a great question. So for us, the pandemic response, the differentiated recovery across the world and across our markets has been a real concern for us for the last few years, and it's been heavily influencing our agenda and our long-term approach to business. And we've continued, as you highlighted, to experience a changing world, increased disruption, uncertainty, the societal inequities that many of the aspects of the report highlight. I think as an insurer, we have a real role to play in helping to protect our employees, our customers, and the communities that we serve at large. It gives Zurich a real societal lens in what we do. And sustainability is a key element for us in our business model, and that sustainability for our customers, our employees, and our communities. We have a really clear purpose, and we have a lot of optimism about how we can build a brighter future and the role we play within it. So how that's translated into our C-suite discussions is through a continued focus on supporting and protecting our employees and their families. And in addition to our customers and the communities in which they live, we've really been putting our people first and their well-being. And I can give you a couple of examples just by way of action. So, you know, from the minute that the pandemic hit, closing our offices, ensuring our people were safe, giving access to testing, to the vaccinations when they were available, and providing hospitalization benefits to all our employees and their household dependents across the globe. But I think it's also about balancing those short-term needs and reorientating in a post-COVID world with a big focus on how we continue to support well-being, how we operationalize hybrid working, but also with the long-term risks that are highlighted in this report, such as climate change, and how we can build a brighter future for all of our stakeholders.
Thank you, Sally. Wonderful to hear some of those comments about that people first agenda. But I agree with you. I think balancing those short-term response with addressing some of the longer-term issues coming out of COVID is certainly the tricky one. Carmen, I'd love to come to you. You know, Marsh McLennan, over 80,000 employees worldwide, 130 country footprint. I'm interested to see, you know, how are you addressing risks across this significant footprint, and how are some of the aspects highlighted in this report influencing your thinking this year?
Absolutely, Kate. Well, thank you again for having us. And it's wonderful, Sally, to be sharing this platform with you and be able to learn from each other. Because one of the things, Kate, as you talked about in your opening comments, that is clear is just the amount of change we've experienced over the past couple of years. And in many ways, a lot of the questions that you raised that, frankly, Mercer, right, has been raising with clients and advising on for many years have just come thrust forward. So there's so many questions now, a lot more questions than answers. So it's just always great to be able to have conversations and learn from each other. But, you know, Kate, as you said, and Sally, as you said, you know, a lot of very similar themes. I mean, we do share this world, Sally, right, of risk, right, and managing through risk and advising our clients through risk. So this is our world with our clients and our communities. And our purpose at Marsh McLennan is making a difference in the moments that matter across this unique intersection of risk, strategy, and people. So advising our clients on these critical issues is what our 82,000 hearts and minds of colleagues do every single day. So for us, really making sure that we are supporting our colleagues and valuing our colleagues during this time is absolutely top of the list, particularly as we see companies and organizations, and at Marsh McLennan, starting to really rebuild, and I'm going to use the word reinvent themselves, and that's, I think, a very intentional word. And I think, Sally, to your point, in the initial phases of the crisis, I think many organizations like Marsh McLennan and Zurich, responded right away on the well-being and health of colleagues. And that certainly was the number one goal. And now, how do we sustain the focus on well-being? How do we sustain the keeping our colleagues, at the center? But I would say that our CEOs, right, our leaders face a profoundly different paradigm than what we were used to before the pandemic. The value shift in terms of moving from things like network to hierarchy, skills over jobs, this notion of colleagues coming into the office 5 days a week. Mental health was rarely discussed in the workplace pre-pandemic. I mean, let's just call it, right, in many organizations. And that world is gone. So I think for us, Kate, as we're looking at it right now, it's really in this moment of so much change, right, and disruption, that clarity and purpose is really key. And we've doubled down on that clarity. We've doubled down with our colleagues around, what it means to make a difference in the moments that matter, not just for our clients, but for each other. And so keeping those brave conversations, around what it means really to care about the well-being of our colleagues. What does it mean for leaders to lead in a different way? So for us, we've really focused on elevating the importance of humanistic leadership, elevating the importance of a culture of belonging, elevating the importance of learning, and elevating the importance of adopting new ways of working. And we benefit from Mercer's thought leadership and advisory in this space, so that we get to do a little bit of our own home cooking, with our partners, with like Kate and other leaders. But I would say right now, Kate, that we're in a moment where we're in a big sorting period. We don't have all the answers, but for us, we're taking a very much a test and learn approach. And just staying very agile in terms of the moment. So it's really that it's a big focus on leadership. It's a big focus on being very conscious around taking the learnings, from the past couple of years forward in a very intentional way.
Thank you, Carmen. And 82,000, thank you for the correction. That keeps creeping up.
Well, we heard Dan, our CEO, this morning on our earnings call talk about the growth of the organization.
The challenge just gets bigger. That's how I view that.
Yes.
But, what I love from everything you've shared there is no one has the answers. We're asking more questions than ever before. And I think that is absolutely a positive thing that's come out of the pandemic. I love your phrase there about test and learn. I think we've seen huge amounts of innovation across organizations during this period. And we should, as we are today, actively share them with others. I also liked your comments there about it's about the moments that matter, the conversations that we have. Sally, I'd love to come back to you. You mentioned in your opening there that you've recently refreshed your purpose. And you mentioned the phrase, we're working about building brighter futures. So given Carmen mentioned we're building on those learnings, what are those silver linings or those learnings that Zurich has had during this period?
Yeah, and it's so interesting listening to Carmen, because so much of what you say resonates. So I think test and learn, absolutely, and being agile. But I think there are a few learnings and a few positives coming from the experience of managing through the pandemic. So for us at Zurich, there are a few things I would call out. I think the first thing is something that you just mentioned, which is I think it's reinforced our purpose as an organization. I think it's really reinforced the importance of having our purpose, but also what our purpose is and what we stand for, and the need for long-term thinking. I think the second thing I would highlight is that the value of agility and resilience as a skill, as a muscle, as part of who we are. And I think for us, actually, our confidence in our ability to adapt and to adjust to the needs of our customers and to be more flexible has certainly grown. I think there's a definite acceleration on our digital transformation journey. Really, I don't think we could have predicted just how quickly we would have adapted to a totally different way of interacting. And that's not only reshaping the way we interact with our customers and meet their evolving needs, but also how we interact across our organization with our employees. And we've seen as a consequence of that increased creativity, But we've also seen an increased inclusivity. When you're a global organization, bringing people together across borders was actually much more complicated before and logistically a challenge, and now we can bring people together in a virtual setting regularly and mix groups up just with such ease, actually via technology. So I think, with new skills, new ways of working, and I think probably the other thing I would call out is there's something about our remote working and talking to each other who are sat in our homes, just as we are now. You see a personal side. We've met family members, we've met pets, we've seen people's kitchens. And I do think that way in which we connect has become much more personal. And in some ways, it's changed the nature of the relationships. It touches a bit on what you said, Carmen, about that more human way of interacting. And that's definitely shaping our plans looking ahead. So if I look to our people priorities, our people are absolutely at the heart of what we do. So attracting and retaining our people, growing our talent, so upskilling, reskilling, continuing to develop our talent. I also think, and something, Carmen, you mentioned, we've really got a big focus on ensuring that our leaders are equipped with the right skills, the relevant skills to lead in our new realities with a much more empathetic leadership and much more focus on growth and care. And then I think underpinned by a continuing evolution of our employee listening. So ensuring that we're getting the voice of the employee, that we're adapting and providing flexible solutions based on that diverse needs of our employee.
Sally, thank you for sharing so many of those points. I particularly like that one that you said, we've grown in our confidence in how we can adapt and adjust. I have the pleasure of doing our Global Talent Trends survey every year for Mercer. And one of the biggest changes this year from 2 years ago is executives' view on just how adaptable their HR team is and how adaptable their workforce is. And I think that really bodes well for a great year in 2022. Carmen, you shared before what Marsh & McLennan does, and it's in our DNA to talk about risk, to talk about liabilities. What is the flip side of that to you when you think about brighter futures? What's the big learnings you're taking through?
Yeah, we are in the business of risk. We also are in the business of possibilities, and I think that's the other side of the conversation. And so much, Sally, of what you said is resonates with our environment. And I would just, maybe put a few additional points or accents on that. But definitely, I think there are, we have suffered a lot as a society over the past couple of years. We've also learned a lot. And, and in this moment, I think so many of our leaders were really faced with, in a crisis, am I going to move forward, right? Or am I going to stand still? And I really do think that at Marsh & McLennan, it sounds like Zurich, so many companies did use it as an opportunity. I mean, number one, the speed of decision making. So to your point, Sally, like things that we thought we couldn't do, like the shift from that's just impossible to actually we just did that thing has been remarkable. Who knew? If someone came to the executive committee at Marsh & McLennan and said, can someone please get 82,000 colleagues overnight remote? Everyone would have said, absolutely not. So I think that this muscle of agility, Sally, to your point, has been built. But I think the key differentiator for companies is going to be consciously, again, I use this word consciously, taking that muscle and building it, not snapping back to old ways. And I say that we are in an endurance test right now, because let's face it, we're entering year 3 of the pandemic. And while these skills have been, evolved as an organization, as organizations have evolved, there is some waning as well. I mean, one of the things in the report, Kate, that came out was just the social capital erosion, the well-being, the waning. So we got it. So that's why this notion of making sure our leaders are equipped to be able to show up with that bounded optimism, to show up with that ability to inspire, because it's needed, right, in this world. So so I would say that this, the continuing, right, with the high speed of decision making is going to be key as the world continues to evolve. I think keeping a very impact and solution oriented mindset is also going to be important, this forward motion, because we're going to continue to unfortunately have more waves in this pandemic. And so how do we maintain that forward momentum? There's an expression that I was given when I was young. My parents are from Spain, Dominican Republic, pa'lante, which is an expression which is like forward momentum. And so it's a reminder that every opportunity is a moment to grow. So I think the second area I would say is the organization has become very flat. Bringing in client teams virtually to solve issues that we never did before with this level of speed and level of access. So that's been something that I think has been incredible silver lining, democratizing access to talent and to resources. And the last area I would also add is just that the pandemic, I think, has proven that organizational resilience, the ability to adapt, to innovate, to grow, to thrive, is clearly tied to employees' resilience, physical, mental, emotional well-being. Now, we knew that in HR, Sally. We've known this for years, but the pandemic, I think, has just demonstrated how critical that is, and that's why you're hearing me and you as two senior HR executives talk about well-being and how important it is, because it's vital to sustainable organizations going forward. And so I think those silver linings are actually quite profound and positive for employees coming, out of this pandemic.
Carmen, you touched on a few points I just wanted to underline there. One, both of you have talked about the importance of listening and new ways of listening. It's been interesting to see how many head of advisory roles and roles specifically looking at listening and the employee experience have come into being this year across the globe. And the adoption of digital focus groups and pulse surveys and just new ways of connecting and understanding those different personas. Secondly, you did call out we need to be conscious and intentional. Certainly from our employee data, we see a lot of people worried about what's often termed the ping back.
Yes.
And I was talking to a CHRO yesterday driving a big digital transformation, and her executive team was calling out, can we really do this all remote? We'd planned to have 250 people together in Germany and it's not going to happen. And, so there is some old ways of thinking and new ways of thinking that I think are often being navigated by HR. You did tee up the next question very nicely, because you said this is vital to sustainable growth. And sustainable growth is a real theme that is feeding through those new World Economic Forum framework that I was mentioning at the beginning. And I know everybody on this call has been contributing to this along with a number of other CHROs over the last 2 years. And this framework indicates that there are 5 areas becoming increasingly critical to get right. 1, flexibility and protection for all. 2, what you called out, Carmen, human-centric leadership. The discussion we've just been having around health and well-being, learning and employability. I think many of you mentioned the skills agenda, and also our role as organizations in driving social mobility and resilience, the one that you picked up in the report there. Sally, as Carmen was saying, a thread that cuts through all of this is sustainable growth. It's not just growth for growth's sake. So how do we build in sustainable transformation and make sure that that is embedded into some of the design decisions that we will be driving this year? I wondered if you wanted to share how Zurich is embracing that concept.
Yeah, absolutely. For Zurich, sustainability and climate change are very important to us, and it goes back to our purpose and having a positive impact on the future in all that we do. And that absolutely threads through to our sustainable work practices. How that's showing up at Zurich. So there are a few things I'd highlight. So in addition to our big focus on learning, reskilling, upskilling, building long-term careers for our people, we also are turning our commitments into a couple of other actions. So one is we have a strong commitment to hiring internal talent. So there's always a balance between a build and a buy talent acquisition strategy, but wherever possible, building our internal talent. And that's something we're continuously measuring and seeing some real progress in. Now, connected to that, what we're doing is we're investing heavily in youth employment initiatives, and doing that by a number of apprenticeship programs that we have across the globe. We also have, and as many organizations do, we have a huge commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and that's embedded in all of our talent practices. So it really is across the board. We also reject unsustainable behaviors such as offshoring, and we don't go in search of cheap labor. So this really is about committing to our employees with long-term value in mind. We also have the Zurich Foundation, which is a charitable foundation that we established, and it's our main vehicle by which we deliver our global community investment. So it's about giving back to the community, and it empowers vulnerable people within our communities. But it also offers the opportunity for our employees to get involved. So that's a great way for employees to feel that they're also contributing and committing to our sustainability purpose in different ways back to the society and our other stakeholders. And maybe just a final point to add. We also provide opportunities for Zurich employees to be able to contribute to that sustainable future we're trying to build by our internal initiatives just around how we operate in our business. So, for example, going paperless, sustainable food in our restaurants, these small things, but they're really all add up together. And we had a great initiative that we're really proud of, which is our Zurich Forest Project. And it was a reforestation, or is a reforestation project in the Amazonian rainforest in Brazil. And it's something, again, that allows our employees to really contribute to, and I think that's a real engaging factor for our employees, because our purpose is really important to our people.
Sally, you're absolutely spot on. We haven't released our global talent trend study yet, but one of the biggest findings has been the leap over the last 2 years in how employees are respecting and gravitating towards those organizations that do have responsibility at the heart of their transformation agenda, are enabling them to get involved into sustainable efforts, and are actually being pretty vocal on what they believe in. I mean, coming off mute on things such as unsustainable work practices was a pretty bold move. And I think it's a trend we've seen by others. Whether it's been Stanley Black & Decker, who I think has on their website, they want to move from 3% to 10% diversity in their supply chain, and they're working with women and minority organizations to do that. Or it's Unilever saying we want to make sure by 2025 we've built skills for everyone. It really is interesting to see how these great organizations are becoming more human and have a personality, and you can relate to them and you know what they stand for outside their products and services. Really interesting. Carmen, the one that I think maybe has been a bit of a miss has been on sort of the race to reskill. We were just hearing there from Sally how important upskilling, reskilling, that agenda has been. I think it's moving more to agenda around employability, because we're still seeing that big skills divide. And our recent results show that employees' energy for upskilling and reskilling has dissipated. They're fatigued and exhausted, yes, but they just haven't seen the return for some of that effort and have seen it disconnected to the future of work. I'd be interested to hear how you're thinking about that in Marsh McLennan, how you're scaling the skills agenda and maybe solving some of those challenges.
So Kate, this is absolutely key, because, it's interesting. We've spoken so much about the future of work, and it's been so, I'm thinking, Sally, you probably have experienced too as CHROs or heads of HR and departments. It's been so much of the here and now, the when and where of work. And I do agree. I think, Kate, in some ways, that momentum around, that dual focus of the here and now, but then also building and investing for the future. So this reskilling piece, I agree, has probably gotten crowded out, with the moment of the pandemic. And that's something that we've got to absolutely bring front and center. The reality is it is more urgent now than it was 2 years ago, because every year that goes by, right, the speed of change just accelerates. I mean, we know, right, all the studies that show, how skills are evolving and how critical it is for us to continue to upskill. I mean, there's the popular reference, right, of like 65% of children entering school right now, primary school, will end up working in jobs that actually don't exist today. I actually have 2 young kids, and so it's actually kind of fun to think about what will they be doing in like 15, 20 years. But it is, but that's the world that really, there's a version of that in the work world, right? As we see, the skills and requirements and how they're evolving every year. So let me just say first, it's a lot of pressure for managers and colleagues to be in this environment, right? To be working in an environment where that change is happening. So, you mentioned, Sally, solving through sourcing, is a challenge, because you're faced, first of all, with a diminishing pool of talented colleagues, but you're missing an opportunity, right, to continue to prioritize and invest in colleagues. So we clearly, certainly have a focus, Kate, on, internal first and promoting from within as a means, right, to kind of motivate the organization around that continuing upskilling. But I would say, Mercer brings great perspective here, in the organization, and certainly has helped shape our agenda, where I would say very simply, learning runs high. I mean, it is a form of currency in the modern value proposition for colleagues. And modern is exactly the way we're thinking about it. Kate, when you say, what are we doing to think about it and scale it? It actually is by starting with a paradigm shift, a very intentional shift around, what got us here won't get us there. So learning is shifting to become much more dynamic, much more snackable, because we're a snackable society. We like things bite-sized, quick, easy access, relevant to me, customized, and also in community. So one of the things that we're finding in our test and learn approach is we hosted a learning festival globally in the end of last year, where we had over 10,000 colleagues in 1 week participating in a number of learning festivals and moments where virtual courses were taught. It was a community shared event. And I have to tell you, the amount of outreach from our colleagues and the excitement from them around just experiencing that as a community was quite powerful. And so, I think, Kate, this notion of, number one, being very intentional around, Sally, to your point, where are we going? It's all about building from within. And it's also about putting out there, I would say, could be a controversial statement for employers, which is we want to increase the employability of our colleagues. Now, it's not because we want them to leave the organization, but we want them to feel that we are investing in them, continuing upskilling them so that they become even better professionals. So I think that the notion of, speaking about it very intentionally about what the goal is, and then using really modern approaches. And I think as we continue in this virtual world, doing learning in community, I think is a big part of the reskilling, upskilling, movement that we'll see, that our colleagues will be able to see that the company is really investing in them, as a group of colleagues.
I love the concept of learning together. Carmen, you and I have been chatting about how do you figure out how to learn, and laugh together, because it is exhausting trying to do it all. Exactly. And but I think you're onto something with the social events. I know many organizations have found some of the hackathons that they've opened up to people in their community have been a great way. And I do feel some of the learning agenda has got dominated by the amazing online learning that we've all been able to consume. And now it needs to be balanced by movement and opportunities within the company. And I think, Sally, you were already talking about that, because you were saying, look, we want to insource. We want to ensure that we build the skills of our people. And I love your comment there, Carmen. It's about employability, whether you're with us or outside of that. And that's almost the responsibility to the individual. But Sally, one big change we have seen this year from the data from HR has just been the maturity around understanding the skills we have in the organization and using AI to make that easy and scalable, and creating internal talent marketplaces so that some of that technology can also be used to nudge people towards mentors or learning opportunities or next careers. There's been a huge leap in that. I know that's been a journey you've been on at Zurich. I wonder if you wanted to share with us a little bit about how you've approached that and any lessons you've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is one of those areas where we are also testing and learning and adapting as we go. And I think the challenge is really for an organization, how do you scale? How do you build the right skills at the right time and at the speed we need to? And I think in a way that does create that employability. Because there is a speed to this, given the transitions we've been through over the last few years. We've been doing a few things at Zurich. I think one of the things has been, how do we make it simple and easy for employees to know what to learn? I think we have made huge progress on there being such a suite of materials available. Learning content is not our problem. We have vast arrays of it. And again, our people are really resourceful. There are communities they belong to, both within Zurich and beyond that, in which they can tap into learning. I think it's more about how we actually create an employee journey that means an employee knows where to go, what to do, what they need to focus on, and how that aligns to their own career ambitions. And that's what we've been trying to focus on. So we've started with skills frameworks, being really quite, and I think purposeful, I would almost use as the word, what are the skills that we really think it's essential for you to know in this role? What are the skills that we think are essential for you to know in the next role? And then giving employees the empowerment, actually, because they have that transparency of knowledge to be able to then understand for themselves, and with obviously the support of their managers, where their gaps are today, but also support them in helping to figure out what their own ambitions might be and to navigate through that. What gaps do they want to address? And I think the other thing is, of course, we know that learning comes not just through development, but also through experience. How do you tap into and provide experiences? And I think that's where we've done some really interesting things using technology. So one of the things we've been experimenting with is using platforms that enable us to advertise out opportunities where people can jump into projects or additional part-time secondments, but short bursts of additional responsibilities that will give them experiences that will otherwise not be so easy for them to navigate and find. And for us, that's created, actually, it's identified, hugely talented people in the organization that we wouldn't necessarily otherwise have connected to the opportunities we're trying to source for. So I think technology is really an enabler for all of this. I think it's an ongoing challenge to build the skills, because the skills we need continue to evolve. So this is not ever going to be done. And I think it is about making it easy for the employee to navigate to learn.
It's great to hear that democratization of learning and opportunity and making it easier for the employee. But some of those things you've talked about, mapping skills to jobs, they're heavy lifts for HR. How are you facilitating that and making sure that future work agenda stays relevant to your businesses and their futures?
So this is definitely not something I think HR can do alone. I think we are the facilitators. We have a heavy role to play in supporting and guiding and facilitating, but we work in partnership with our business leaders, and that's critical for us. They are the experts that know what skills are going to be relevant. They're the ones who've got a real finger on the pulse in terms of what skills we're going to need in the future, as much as that's predicted. So this is really a partnership activity where we're facilitating, enabling, but our leaders are critical.
Yeah, I think having business leaders engaged in the HR agenda absolutely has to be part of the future of work. So thank you for highlighting.
And the now of work.
And the now of work. I think you're right. It is very much the now of work. And as we do talk about the now of work, Carmen, we've been dancing all over this new future of work framework. One aspect we haven't touched on is human-centric leadership. We've talked a bit about empathy, but it can be quite an amorphous concept. I'm wondering what your views are on this topic. And I think I've heard you say before that we're doubling down in this area. What does that mean in practice?
Well, let me just say, Kate, this topic is near and dear. I consider myself a lifelong student of leadership. And Marsh McLennan advises organizations around the world on the topics we've all been talking about for the past 45 minutes, the most pressing issues of our time, topics like future of work, organizational resilience, culture, leadership, ESG more broadly. So when it comes to leadership, let me just say that it raises the bar for us as an organization, just given our advisory role in the world for many organizations. So what we've done here is, over the past 2 years, we have, again, I'm going to use the word conscious. We've been very conscious about understanding what are we learning about the new ways that we are leading at Marsh McLennan. We want to harness those lessons where, those lessons are showing us that colleague sentiment is reinforcing that humanistic leadership matters. And Sally, you mentioned this too. Empathy, flexibility, adaptability. We know that matters. We know that's important in the organization. So now we need to codify that with our leaders. And where we've come to is that leadership is not a job title. Leadership is a mindset. And so our leadership mindset, to your point, is not amorphous. Leadership is something that there is science behind it. There's research behind it. And so we've come up with a leadership mindset based on 5 foundational principles, or 5 primary accountabilities, which are really to, number 1, inspire with vision and passion. Second is make sure we're expanding value for clients and each other, driving growth, unlocking people's potential, and very importantly, displaying resilience, humanity, and humility. And that last piece is so important because it's the inner game, right, of the leader. that when they show up to teams, when they show up in those moments, that they are displaying that humanity and humility. So it's important because we know it's key to our performance. The studies show it, right? So unlocking our colleagues' potential is certainly the way to unlock the company's potential. So it's putting our colleagues first. It's a people-centric model. It's based on the belief that we are at our best when our people are at their best. We have more than 82,000 colleagues, as you know. We have 14,000 people managers. And I always want to go and make sure we talk about the people managers who really they've had a big job over the past 2 years. They've been confronted with having to show up with that, again, that optimism, that hope for teams. We've onboarded over 20,000 colleagues. Now, 1 in 4 colleagues is new to Marsh McLennan since the pandemic. That's a big deal, and I know that's the case in many companies. So this notion, Kate, of being able to articulate what our leadership mindset is, so that it's accessible and can help strengthen our culture at a time where we're still working virtually, we think is also really important, so that our leaders have that compass, and that our colleagues feel the support. And so for us, it's very critical. It's high on the agenda, certainly for Dan Glazier, our CEO and I. We've been doing some virtual water coolers with leaders around the company to understand how is it going, what are we learning, how can we better support you? And we are making it tangible by making sure we're having assessments and development planning to further strengthen our pipelines aligned to these outcomes when it comes to our leadership principles. So it's an exciting time because people are excited about getting involved and bringing this to life.
Gosh, I can hear your excitement, and it's interesting that it's taken this time of social distancing to realize the importance of human connections and how you show up. And I love that language around, being human and showing up a little differently and learning to partner in a new way than we have before in this flat organization where we are interacting across temporal, geographic, and digital boundaries. Exciting times indeed. Sally, I know we're coming right to the end of our conversation now, but before we close, I just wanted us to hear from you. Is there anything else you want to add with regard to what you think is going to be critical for success in 2022?
I think it to build on everything we said. I think well-being will continue to be at the heart of what we do. I think continuing to respond to and listen to our employees. And I think it is about having an employee experience which is tailored to the diverse needs of our people. And leadership and everything that Carmen just said there it really resonates. I think leadership and our managers, they play such a key role in what we do. And I think ensuring that we really focus on providing them with the support and the development to be able to be successful and to be able to take our people with us on this journey is going to be really key for 22.
Carmen, comment from you. What are your hopes for 2022?
Well, I would just build on Sally. And by the way, this has been a fantastic conversation. So I've learned and I've really appreciated the time. But I would just build on that. I do want to just reinforce the concept of well-being and belonging. I think as again, given where we are across the organizations and society, but also our societies, we haven't spoken a lot about social justice conversation, but I do think it's critical, and belonging, I think, is going to become much more prominent, certainly for us, but also for organizations around the world, because that is going to be key, I think, to the sustainable growth. I mean, all the studies show that, right? When people feel a sense of belonging, they will give more of themselves, and they will feel more connected. And so, we talk about the fact, diversity is, the getting invited to the dance, inclusion is being asked to dance, belonging is dancing like nobody's watching. We want our colleagues to feel like they're dancing like nobody's watching. We want them to bring their full selves. And I think that is going to be a key focus for 2022. I actually think belonging is going to be one of the critical ways that we will be able to continue to thrive, not just as people and as employees, but as organizations. So I think we'll hear more, Kate, on that in 2022, not just at Marsh McLennan, but also I think from our clients and organizations.
I think you're absolutely right on that. Belonging is going to be a tough one, as well, as a lot of the things that have driven belonging have come from the culture in offices or the face-to-face connections that people have. So we are heralding in a new era where belonging needs to be ingrained in the fabric of the organization in all ways. Well, we could talk for another 45 minutes on this topic.
Easily.
Really exciting. And I'd love to carry on the discussion. I'm sure we probably will offline. But can I just say huge thank you, Sally and Carmen, for being so generous with your insights, your reflections, and your thoughts on the future of work. Certainly, there's been many takeaways for me today. Carmen, your comment there about dance, I love. We've been saying we need to, earn, learn, and laugh. Well, maybe we need to dance together as well. I like
exactly.
that. And Sally, you mentioned a lot about, the need to constantly be listening, the importance of the commitments you make to your customers, but also to your employees, particularly around insourcing and making sure that we're intentional in how we design our organizations. Carmen, I love the fact you said, skills and learning is a form of currency in the new world of work, and we've got to drive that paradigm shift through our leaders. I loved your point about we've got to make it snackable if people are going to listen to it in the current climate. But there's two things I think maybe cut through a lot of this. You all mentioned test and learn. Test and learn, test and learn. These are uncharted territories, and we've got to keep trying things, keep learning, keep listening to our people. The second thing you kept mentioning was we've got to be intentional in how we show up, which Zoom meetings we join, who we invite, do we go into the office, do we stay home, and intentional on the things that we preserve that we think are important to shape the future of work together. Thank you both. It's been a great discussion. Listeners, if you want to read more about the Global Risk Report, please do head to the MMC Advantage page. There's actually a number of experts offering some snackable bites that you can listen to.
I'm definitely going to go to that one then.
And if you are keen to learn more about the Future Work Framework that's upcoming, or Mercer's Global Talent Trend Study, both are out in March. Please watch this space. They'll be coming to you. And if you enjoyed listening to this conversation, do visit brinknews.com and learn about some upcoming conversations that are going to be happening. And also sign up for Brink events. It'll keep you in the loop of what's happening and what's upcoming. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for my two panelists today. It's been a vibrant conversation. And please, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kate.